Welcome guys, gals, and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, one of your hosts. With me as always is your other prolific host,
Brian. Hi.
85 episodes.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely worth noting when we reached episode number 85, a very specific number.
It just stood out to me like an arbitrary but a satisfyingly round number of episodes. It sounds big.
It is. It is definitely a large amount.
So in this episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer's podcast, Buffy Boys, we will be talking about Season 5, Episode 7 of Buffy, Fool for Love.
Sure will be. Okay, so this episode was written by Doug Petrie and directed by Nick Mark, M-A-R-C-K, which I thought was unusual. It was first aired on November 14th, 2000. The directing and writing thing, though, was a little messy here because some of the scenes directed, for example, in the Boxer Rebellion shots, were specifically shot by Tim Minear, who wrote and directed the Darla episode. And it was the first episode he either wrote or directed for Angel.
So basically, Darla episode in Angel this week is a specifically a companion piece to this episode.
Oh yeah, I think it's probably the closest it's definitely the closest crossover we've had so far. The other one being the fucking Ring of...
Yeah, they tend to do that classic thing of start on one show, finish on the other, but this is really intermingled scenes. Yeah, absolutely.
That's an unusual one here, having a specifically different director and content from like a different... Anyway, I think it works. It's quite seamless. Anyway, here's your Buffy Ann summary. Injured by a minor vampire and concerned about deaths of slayers, Buffy interrogates Spike about how he killed two. In flashbacks, we see ineffectual poet William turned by Drusilla, his self-invention as Spike, and fights with Angel, his killing of a slayer in China and of another in New York. Like them, Buffy will be killed by her own death wish. Buffy spurns his advances. Joyce is hospitalized. Spike, who has come to kill Buffy, comforts her. Cool. We'll kind of get into all that, I suppose, at some point.
Yeah, it's interesting because that does describe mechanically what happens in the plot, but none of the actual revelation or introspection or even kind of, it doesn't really frame the episode well, as in like I wouldn't necessarily remember this is the episode with all the like flashbacks to England and the you wouldn't remember that from the from the description. Yeah,
exactly. So like if I was trying to find the episode where you kind of get Spike's backstory, I wouldn't go to that one or I wouldn't get it from that.
Absolutely. We'll get to that shortly. But for a bronze banter this week, we're actually and this episode actually features the bronze quite heavily, but
it does.
Rip. We're going to talk about
just because like it presumably exploded with the rest of Sunnydale.
Yeah, I really could say that about anything at Sunnydale.
Yeah,
Sunnydale General Mental Hospital.
Espresso pump. Rip.
Espresso pump. I find it absolutely alien to see places like that on American TV shows where they can just have open, like they're outside. Yeah. Just as a rule, they're outside. Yeah. Anyway, so what we want to talk about was we've been we're slip sliding back into quarantine, deeper into quarantine here in Ireland. So we're
it's specifically in Dublin.
In Dublin, yeah. So we've been getting deeper into our backlog of TV shows, and we said, look, we'll try something new. Little minor indie show no one's ever heard of, maybe had a little bit of success at the Emmys, Euphoria, featuring Zendaya, who, as we all know, plays Michi. And I knew nothing about this show going in. I knew that, I knew Zendaya won an Emmy. Didn't know what show it was for. Didn't realise it was about Euphoria.
About Euphoria.
Euphoria.
It's actually a deep dive into the writing of the song, the Eurovision winning song Euphoria.
The amount of times we only started watching this last night. The amount of times Brian has sung Euphoria by, I don't know, who is it? Evanescence.
Loretta Lynn? No, it's not Loretta Lynn. It's Lorena.
Lorraine. It's not Lorraine. Anyway, and I think one other thing I know about it is I believe this was the TV show which has controversy in a later episode because they animated a fan fiction scene about two of the guys from One Direction having sex.
I heard that, yeah.
And there was a whole thing about like, these are real people,
I think, yeah. Yes.
That's all I knew about the show, basically. I also thought it was shorter, to be honest, like it's an hour long. But
it is an hour long, yeah. It's 8 episodes. And there's a season 2 confirmed, so that's interesting. But it's based on an Israeli TV show from 2012.
Really?
Yeah. And it's... I only clicked this because I only clicked that it was based on something else because I looked it up and I was like, Euphoria, and it said US TV show, and I was like, because whenever it says that, it's like Wikipedia is usually good for not
calling the root version.
Calling the root version, attributing the root version to the root kind of address, if you get me. And I was thinking of the very, very similar situation with In Treatment, which is another HBO TV show. I want to say based in Israeli. It's definitely a Middle Eastern property. It might be Iranian. I think it's Israeli, a TV show which starred Gabriel Byrne. A very fascinating TV show. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, I remember you watching this. This was when you used to watch TV on your laptop phase.
Yeah. So basically what it did when it was releasing was it would show one episode each of 5 nights for a week during its season run, and it would run for probably like 6 to 8 weeks. And each of those 5 nights was a different therapy session you had with a different client, and you had the same weekly schedule basically, and exploring his personal life as well as these different people who are going to therapy, their problems. It's fascinating. I never finished season 3 because I'm a bad person, but seasons 1 and 2 really, really good. Anyway, so Euphoria, based on Israeli TV show, lots of exploration of drug and sex use by teens essentially. So very I would say very closely resembles a Skins if you watch Skins in when it was originally out in 2006.
I think Skins is a really useful touch point, even though it is a different tone and definitely
it's a comedy. Skins at times,
yeah, but it does have that mix of yes, what's happening in this is definitely dramatized. It's definitely there's an element of obviously stylization to it. But yes, sometimes Skins and Euphoria are both you can say yes, this is a very dramatic situation, but it still has a sense of realism, verisimilitude, relatability. It definitely, I think, my understanding is, and I'm not surprised, it's garnered a lot of controversy for the graphic and extensive sex and drug use and violence and stuff like that. But at the same time, it doesn't feel to me like an unrealistic situation for teens to be in. It's just that we portray through television that people don't use the bathroom and people don't have sex a lot of the time still, and to my surprise, knowing nothing about the show, one of the amongst the various aspects in it, there's a couple of relatively complex and not complex at the same time queer characters and queer relationships in it, which I'm sure will be developed further. Notably, I think probably to my watching, one of the only, if not one of the only extensive main character inclusions of a trans teen girl in a TV show that I'm familiar with. Yeah,
no, absolutely.
Which is not Zendaya.
No, it's not.
Importantly, exactly. She's played by a trans woman,
which is always important. And Zendaya is just really fucking good. I can 100% see why she got the Emmy. She's so perfect at portraying such a sense of coolness and kind of vulnerability, while being incredibly charismatic and very easy for an audience to find a touch point with her, in the sense that I find her very inviting and warm as a very closed off person. While she's portraying closed off people, I think that's a really, really important skill. I'm so excited to see her in Dune. I love Dune. So much. I can't wait to see it. The trailer is so good, and it's Denis. It's Denis
Villeneuve.
Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah. Denis Villeneuve. For all we know, we could have been saying that wrong all these years, and his name's actually Dennis. But
he's French Canadian.
Yeah, but so exactly. But yeah, Zendaya as that character whose name escapes me in Dune.
Oh, sorry, Dune.
But who I'm very Changi. I'm a very big fan of Dune, and it looks absolutely gorgeous.
It does look gorgeous.
And I think
there's a big butthole snake in it.
It's not a snake. They're specifically, extensively referred to as worms. Any Huzel. But yeah, so it's that looks incredible. And we have
isn't the classic image of Dune Paul Atreyu riding the big sea snake?
It's Atreyu definitely isn't his name, but I think it's Atreyu the name of a dragon or something. Is that what you're
Atreyu is the name of a dragon in Neverending Story.
Neverending Story. Okay.
It's also the name of a really bad hardcore emo band from mid-noughties.
Yeah. Speaking of dragons, in this episode of Buffy, we see the Box Rebellion, which obviously took place in the year of the dragon 18 I've absolutely no idea, but it's tenuous connection at best.
Is it 1890s or is it 1900 or very early 1900s? It probably isn't very early 1900s because you see Angel in New York by that point.
So yeah, well, that whole segment definitely ends by 1900.
Okay.
It doesn't go any further than that, or
Doesn't
maybe
go into the 20th century.
No, not extensively. So it's between. I will tell you when it is. It takes place in the year 1900. Is my strong feeling, because
the Boxer Rebellion.
The Boxer Rebellion, because Spike is turned in 1880. I remember that. And I remember that Angel, after Spike kills the Chinese Slayer, says, "Oh, now you're one of us." And I remember thinking, it took him 20 years to become one of them. So 1900 thereabouts, or maybe 1899.
Yeah.
So just to kick off on this, I really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, me too.
And I think it pairs very specifically with Darla on the Angel TV show. And as we've discussed, I think people generally would consider Darla to be the slightly stronger episode, but probably by virtue of the fact that it's an exceptionally strong episode of Angel, and there are better episodes of Buffy. But still, what I liked about this episode of Buffy is that it goes deep again on the vampire thing, which we just haven't had for a while. Yeah,
no, it really does bring it back to the roots. So it's very specifically a crossover episode. We watched it in the wrong order, in the sense that we watched Angel a couple of days ago. Excuse me, because we usually watch Angel first, because I'm not sure why.
Because it's just a little bit more digestible.
It's a little bit more digestible. We don't have to do so much of a deep dive into it, but we tend to watch Angel first, which is the wrong way around, because Angel was shown a couple hours after Buffy on airing. So we don't do that properly, but I think it was specifically something was lost for this one, because there's lots of the Buffy episode which have Spike walking out of a thing and bumping into people, and then you kind of see in the Angel episode it's actually Angel and Darla and Drusilla, or Drusilla. Oh my god, Drusilla just kind of appears out of nowhere in a part of the Buffy episode, and you see in the Angel episode that she had a reason to go search for Spike, stuff like that. And the Angel episode answers questions from the Buffy episode, but very much a crossover episode, and very heavily connected to each other. And very good. I agree. It's definitely one of the strongest Angel episodes. Darla, but I'm not even sure if I would say that Darla is better than Fool for Love. I think Darla is very good in the sense it explores very deeply Darla's character, and the very unusual, very sad predicament that she's in, which is that she's a person with a soul who has to now wrestle with the fact that she did all these horrific things.
But we'll come to Darla. I think there's lots to be said on that as well.
Sure, but I think the Buffy stuff that we're dealing with here, which is that Buffy having to come to terms with death and with mortality and the existential dread that comes along with that, is when faced with both her potential death, her knowing that death is the only way that she gets peace, and then with the death of her mother potentially, all that intertwined is incredibly potent stuff. And the only reason we don't see it as being deeply potent is that it becomes very much the overarching theme of the season. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I think that one of the specific frustrations, Buffy is struggling with the fact that despite all of her power, she can't overcome death ultimately, and that's reflected, I think, very much in the Joyce subplot. I always find that in all these episodes, and not that not to be callous or anything, but Buffy is so she crumbles at any mention of Joyce's health, and more so than Dawn even, really. She's very vulnerable to it and immediately freaks out at every opportunity.
Well, it's a control issue, I think, in the sense that and we see this very much in the body. Buffy is a very controlling person. Season 7 really highlights this, and it really goes into depth into Buffy's issues with control and with a lack thereof. So when she comes up against situations that she can't fight, that she can't control, she absolutely crumples. She has no ability to interact with that.
And where the frustration, I think, here comes, and what drives her to talk to Spike, is not that she got nearly killed by Spinal Tap looking vampire.
Oh, no. Definitely not Spinal Tap. He was wearing a Clash t-shirt.
Okay.
He and he was wearing an anarchy like leather jacket, so he's definitely supposed to be punk, but he was obviously very clearly Billy from Hocus Pocus.
Oh yeah, he was that as well, yeah. But the frustration comes from the fact that she talks about how she is in the best physical shape of her life. She's training harder than ever, and now is when she's getting, she wants to be able to equate that if I work harder, I measurably reduce the possibility, potentially to zero, that bad things will happen, and that's just not really what the equation is, yeah. And arguably, like, something we explore through Spike's dialogue, and I suppose the question we have to take is, how much is he right? He talks about his philosophy, which he may or may not actually believe, but that the reason why the previous Slayers lost to him was because they eventually wanted to die, they wanted an end to the uncertainty, and there was a moment of hesitation, essentially.
The like Spike as unreliable narrator in this episode, and is such an important role. So it's very much established from the offset of these flashbacks that while Spike is delivering a certain amount of information to Buffy, we are getting a very different amount of information as a viewer. So he says, like, I've always been this way, or something. I can't even remember what the line was.
I've always been bad.
I've always been bad. And then immediately you see William, the poet, essentially, Spike, before he was sired, like, being a very sensitive little boy who, like, wrote poetry and couldn't find a good word for effulgence. With that, you set up Spike as this very unreliable narrator. So the question of whether or not Spike is right in saying that all Slayers have a death wish, it kind of determines your view of the whole season. I think it's going to be a really interesting one to look at going forward. Was Spike like telling an uncomfortable truth, or was he manipulating and maybe just wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting to note that I was kind of watching the fight scenes between the two Slayers, and the Chinese Slayer obviously isn't named this episode, or neither are named this episode.
We get the name for the 70s, 80s?
It was 70s, 1977.
70s Slayer, who's, of course, Nikki Wood.
Yeah, Nikki Wood, whose song becomes a main character in season 7.
I love Nikki Woods.
Yeah, but the Chinese Slayer in extra canon material has been named with Xing Rong, and I prefer to use that just because I like to give them names where I can. Yeah. But in both instances, he gets the upper hand because of a distraction, or because something a chaotic variable just tips things in his favor. So I think that's also part of it as well. Like, there is a certain amount of aggrandizing to the whole thing.
Well, additionally, this episode also highlights, like, Spike verbally highlights that one of Buffy's things that she is going for her is the fact that she has a support group. That's one of the things he said to Adam as well, was that, like, the reason that Buffy can do this is that she's, like, she has her Scoobies, basically. And these other Slayers are very much alone. And so if you see, like, Nikki Wood was trying to protect Robin at the time, and that was her vulnerability, and that was what got her killed. But she didn't have a support group otherwise. Yeah. And in this episode, Buffy, when she is attacked by the Slayer, the vampire who nearly gets the upper hand on her, or does get the upper hand on her, she's very explicitly saved from, like, most certain death by Riley. So it highlights that her support group here are the differentiating factor, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there is a theme of that running through, and obviously the danger being that if and when she loses Joyce, that's going to crack a pillar on that. But notably, there's a theme of kind of motherhood through that as well, and kind of, like, feminine connection or female connection. Insofar as you have Nikki Woods trying to protect her song, you have Xing Rong's last thing she says to Spike in Chinese is "Tell my mother I'm sorry," and then obviously Buffy feeling very vulnerable about Joyce as well. So yeah, it's I've always felt that it was really restrained on behalf of the show. I've said this before, that they show bare few other Slayers outside of the couple who come in prior to season 7.
It's also thematically great in the sense that, like, part of the thing that the show is trying to say is that Slayers are separated from each other, that, like, if the Kains can have anything to do with it, that they'll never have two Slayers interacting. So when Faith comes along, or Kendra, like, it's very much an aberration, and it very much gives all of those people strength. I think, Faith would have been so much more fucked if she'd never met Buffy in the end, but and then having the conclusion of the show be that women have that connection with each other and have a network and have like, you know, familial internal support.
Yeah.
Like it's very much it very much makes sense.
That, yeah.
Very much it makes sense that Buffy has no access to previous layers.
Yeah. And I know without a doubt, if I was writing this show, I'd write a worse one, which is basically Assassin's Creed, and be like, what was the Slayer doing on the Botany Bay? Do you know what I mean? It would every other week it would be a flash
it'd be
forward.
like, you know, what if there was an Irish Slayer who, you know, just lived in Cork and had to fight banshees?
Yeah,
Ooh.
like literally that's the show I'd write. We run for 18 seasons and be commercially incredibly successful and critically panned after season 2.
That's a very mean thing to say about Supernatural.
Look, we've seen what Supernatural's birth is unto the world. Yeah,
Supernatural must be finished now, is it? Is it finished or is it finished?
Finale was meant to have already aired, but it was COVID delayed, so it's going to air.
Was the filming COVID delayed?
Yes, I believe so, but I think they said that by the end of the year they're going to have it. They're going to kill God.
Thank Christ.
They're going to kill God. Christ. I was going somewhere with that. I was going to be really interesting and compelling audio.
Different Slayers.
But yeah, no, we definitely see, I think, the relationship between the vampire and the Slayer is like still a kind of core motivator in this episode, because while vampires are obviously not the most powerful threat, they have a thematic and a familial link to the human in a way that no other threat does. It's always your fighting aspect of yourself.
Yeah.
When you're fighting a vampire.
Yeah, I have something to say about that actually. Would you believe? But yeah, I totally agree. This episode really conflates. So you'll have noticed when Spike is describing his fights with Nikki, I think specifically, he uses a lot of very sexual language. He says things like he was slipping into her or something like that, and
just dancing and how, you know, it turns him on, all this kind of stuff.
Exactly. So I think, I'm not sure who I read who said this. I think it probably was Mark Field talking about just like Le Petit Mort, which is the little death, which in classic literature references is kind of like the equation of the orgasm with death and with kind of like a loss of the self and a loss of existence and selfhood. But so here's what Rhonda Wilcox has to say about that whole notion. In Full for Love, the episode in which we first see William, the softer side of Spike, we also see Spike kill 2 Slayers. As he describes their deaths at Buffy's request, he explains to her that every Slayer has a death wish, even you. He warns her that she's just a little bit in love with it, that someday she'll feel the desire, and the second that happens, you know I'll be there, I'll slip in. In this emotionally charged scene, the image of Spike slipping in unquestionably joins visions of sex and death. So of course does Buffy when she tells the ensouled angel, when I kiss you I want to die, not an idle comment made to a vampire. When Buffy imagines Riley in her dreams and Hush, she has him say, if I kiss you it'll make the sun go down. I would add that despite this statement coming from Buffy's imagined sense of Riley, who is soon to be her boyfriend, still the combination of the kiss, the unconscious, and the setting sun evoke the image of a vampire again. Of Buffy's 3 major sexual relationships, 2, the first and last, have been with vampire. Angel can never make love with his beloved Buffy because he will lose his soul if he does. His absolute restraint puts him in the position of the superego, while Spike at first clearly expresses the id. So yeah, it's just like it's a fascinating episode in that sense that it really has a lot of messy implications. I mean, dropping the not the bombshell, that sounds so ridiculous, dropping the notion into a teens TV show that like maybe Buffy wants to die, maybe that's how she can find her peace. I don't understand how you walk away from. I remember myself finding it very confusing that the entire season 5 arc of Buffy, the whole just the death is your gift kind of thing, and the implication that Buffy has a sense of calm and peace when she decides to throw herself off the TV tower. I'm not sure, the TV tower. I don't know.
It's not a TV tower, but you raise a good question. What was that?
Yeah. Anyway, I found that very confusing when I was younger, and it's because it's a very deep, very traumatic existential issue, and it's very very much like the kind of the Sisyphean Sartre kind of thing of
yes.
So Sartre, and it's kind of his premise for existentialism, and his first question for existentialism is, do you commit suicide or do you decide to engage with the world and find meaning, or not find meaning, because meaning doesn't exist in a ontological sense. Meaning. construct meaning or attribute meaning. So you kind of, so with this, there's a very deep, physically, like literal existential issue, i.e. do you continue to exist? But also like, meaningfulness issue, which I think is very interesting. Go on.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I thought one of the small exchanges that highlight like some of the endemic human weaknesses to the Slayer concept is because Buffy's like, there's so many details here of this Slayer and that Slayer had this life, she did this fantastic thing, fought this great battle, great little detail about a Slayer who forged her own weapons, which I thought was quite cool. But then she's like, there's no specific details of their final battle, like why did they lose, like, and I think in talking about their final battle, she's looking for the human element of like what was it for, to a certain degree. I think that's what's contained in the last battle.
That's a great point.
And Giles makes a point, it's like, well, it's usually the Watchers who are keeping these accounts, and it's too painful for them to discuss the bad day they had where she slipped up and they lost her. Do you know what I mean? And that
who was a Slayer who immediately came before Buffy?
I think we mentioned this before, but there were what was the network they were on initially when they aired? It wasn't a CW, was it? Or WB or something? Yeah. There are kind of weird non-canon TV spots of 30 seconds where it's like Nicola Walcott in the milk mines of so they
if you mentioned it before, it's completely slipped out of my brain.
So before the pilot episode, or before the first episode aired, they did do like 20-second TV spots where it's like, here's 5 random, it was almost like those Canadian moments in history things. Here's 5 random Slayers from the last 100 years, all of whom seem to have been in America, etc. That kind of stuff.
Shocking
but no, and there is like a, from what I understand, not a particularly good novel that specifically focuses on it as well. But like, no, we don't know. And it feels like you would open the first episode of this show showing the previous Slayer being killed or something like that, and then having Buffy being called or whatever. But they don't do that. We don't know, and it implies in so many ways that it doesn't matter because the point is still there.
Agreed.
But I think this is as much as this episode is remembered as a Spike focus episode, I think this is a critical episode in the Slayer canon, as it were, as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, it's the only episode that shows us previous Slayers that isn't Sinea. What do you think of the title, Joel?
Fool for Love. It's a reference to a song, isn't it?
It's not. It's a reference to a Sam Shepard play.
Okay.
Sam Shepard. I can't remember what I read by him. I read a play by him and I really liked it. Now I've completely forgotten what it was. Oops.
So I think initially, like, my draw to that title is one of the things that Spike is supposed to be differentiated by is that he has such a humanity and such a sensitivity and such emotionalness in life that he's one of the few vampires that after death still retain some of the classically human emotions, and that kind of infects everything he does, and he is kind of quite romantic and quite vulnerable, I think, as a vampire throughout the show, and for good and for bad purposes. And I think it bleeds through that, and it also bleeds through how so many of the Slayers, when they do make a mistake, it's because they're distracted by something that they care about, or things like that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think
obviously he makes an absolute fool of himself at the end of the episode as well. So.
Yeah, I think it's like a really interesting title because it's so multifarious in here. So yeah, you have your Spike, who's clearly a fool for love when he tries to court Cecily. You have Angel and Darla, who I think in this episode you kind of get hints that, like, so the thing about Angel being at the Boxer Rebellion is that it's after he's gotten his soul back, and he is trying to go back to Darla because he wants to find his place in the world again, even though he has a soul. And that's one of the messes that Angel Season 2 presents, is that Angel wasn't just like got his soul back and immediately starting to repent kind of thing. So you have Angel being influenced to pursue Darla, even though he's not willing to actually kill innocent people because of it. You also then have Drusilla, who's looking for companionship. You have Buffy, who's her weakness there is her mother dying and her relationship with Dawn and stuff like that. And then you also have Spike, who's clearly a fool for loving Buffy. So I think it's an all interconnected thing. I think the Fools for Love and the Sam Shepard play are brother and sister, which is maybe not a great implication. And Buried Child, that's the one I read by Sam Shepard, who I just found out died. I didn't realize he died in 2017.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh.
How do we feel about the ending of the episode with like absolutely bizarrely Spike being like, well, I'll just blow her away with a shotgun.
Which, yeah, I think, okay, do we think that I think that ship is badly designed. If you can tell when Spike is intending to do harm, and he discusses that at length here, he's like, yeah, I can tell when I'm trying to hurt you, because he's punching away at Buffy, but he doesn't think he's going to hit her at all. He's just swinging in the air, basically. So the implication is that the ship is designed to prevent harm, i.e. it should work way even before he hits the person. But he often hits people and just feels a lot of pain, as opposed to just thinking about doing or intending to do it. And then surely that would prevent him from actually shooting her as well. It's such a bizarre plot point.
It's like Calvin Paul in his brain, basically. Yeah.
But he comes up with her with a shotgun, intending to kill her, because she tells him that if she does ever feel the need to die, that it won't be him, because he is beneath her. It's a very, like, she also throws money at him, like very much like an image of a sex worker being like denigrated,
and obviously echoing his exchange with Cecily in his past as well.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of weird gender reversal in the power exchanges between Buffy and Spike over the years, which I think we'll probably discuss at some point. But yep, so she denigrates him and tells him that he's beneath her, and he intends to kill her because of this. And he finds her where Buffy has just found out that Joyce has to go back in for more tests to the hospital, because the thing they thought was nothing is probably not nothing.
It's a brain bomb.
It's a brain bomb. And so it was Spike seeing Buffy crying. Basically, just decides to and he was reduced to tears himself in the alley where he and Buffy were fighting outside the Bronze, which is a very odd moment. And decides to comfort her in a very, very odd moment in the show. A real turning point, I think, for the Spike character, where I think it's by far the most relatable and the most human he has been to this point. Yeah,
absolutely. It's probably one of the few moments where he's not saying something that's quipping or bombastic or self-aggrandizing. And I suppose something that they're trying to portray is like, even without his soul. And it's actually one of the things they discuss, I think, towards the end of the show with Spike in comparison to Angel as well, is Spike, whether we like it or not, he does develop as a person, as a character, and he does that without the benefit of having the soul that's like motivating him to do that.
Yeah, which I always find very dodge, just as like an implication for a vampire, is that Spike is essentially ensouled before he gets his soul back. He has all the attempt, so
it's organically grown soul, basically.
Anyway, but yeah, it's an odd one. I have such weird feelings just about Spike as a character. I'm not a huge Spike stan. I know there are people out there who are like insane about Spike. I sometimes feel like his inclusion in the show from this point on, and his character line or character progression and his storylines and his relationship with Buffy, I often find it a bit inorganic. So we'll explore that more. But it's also very annoying, because whenever I'm doing research for it, if it's any episode that's in any way like has implications about Spike, about 8 times more people have written about it, so I have to go looking 8 times more places. But very rarely have people written anything interesting, besides like categorizing the like history of Spike, because he's such an interesting character.
So, do we want to look at the dusting, for virtue of the fact that I would like us to move on to Darla, because it's going to be related to this as well?
Yeah. I would just note quickly that the Markville specifically says that there is a very interesting existential issue there within the kind of the role of the Slayer, which is that the only way to abdicate responsibility, to abdicate meaning, to abdicate engagement is to die. And if you're to continue living, what does that mean? I actually thought, it's a really beautiful metaphor for kind of responsibility and adulthood is trying to identify responsibilities and deciding to engage with them rather than shirking them. Anyway, and additionally, we also get, if we're talking, we kind of talk a lot about naming in this show, which is hilarious for a TV show with the main character called Buffy. But in this episode, we get a couple of retcons / revelations about Spike's name. When Giles introduces Spike, it talks about Spike in season 2. he says that Spike got his name because he used to drive railroad spikes through victims' heads to like torture them, and he was called William the Bloody because of the bloody trail that he left around his rampage. And in this episode, we find out that he Spike was called William the Bloody because of his bloody awful poetry, and someone then says they want to drive a spike through a head while listening to his poetry.
Yeah.
And Spike obviously takes that and
runs with it.
Well, runs with it, yeah.
And turns it into a thing. The guy who was insulting his poetry looked like he was halfway through being transformed into a mouse in The Witches. Like, he was the most not human looking Victorian man I've ever seen.
He definitely looked like someone from Whoville.
Yeah, he did. That's a great point, Brian.
Thanks. Okay. Buffy Bits.
Yes.
So I have a couple for you. So we see the Chaos Demon in this episode that Spike referred to Drusilla leaving him for in season 3. He has antlers and he's slimy, and it's very clearly they tried to kit bash a demon together from the description they gave in season 2, and they're like, this is ridiculous. You noted this while we were watching this, but I actually do have it in my notes, so I'm allowed to say it. They vaguely referred to Spike's real name being William Pratt, which is the less commonly used real name for the actor Boris Karloff. Very appropriate. This is the following appearance of Darla in Buffy. Not the final appearance of Drusilla, but I can't remember what the final appearance of Drusilla is.
Another flashback, probably.
A couple of places noted that there's actually a huge plot hole here, which is that if the whirlwind was walking through China during the Boxer Rebellion, they would definitely be assailed, as opposed to like they're shown as being kind of like fearsome and avoided in a really actually well done shot of the four of them walking towards the camera. The Boxer Rebellion was based on boxers in this instance not actually being boxers, but the English referred to Chinese martial artists as being boxers, and a lot of the military would have been martial artists at this point in China. And the rebellion began because of an displeasure with the kind of the white influence in China at the time, and the kind of aristocratic notions that they had. And yes, it was very much against white people in good dress or in nice clothes. So this the implication that they're able to walk unassailed through the streets of China at the time, unlikely.
My counterpoint: they're vampires.
They are vampires. So Doug Petrie has said that the scene where Angel and Spike are fighting and Drusilla and Darla are watching, somewhat enjoying it, is supposed to be a reference to the kind of homoeroticism between men that women enjoy watching.
Yeah, like slash fishing kind of vibes.
Yeah, exactly. Spike does finish the poem that he's writing here in this episode in Not Fade Away, which he performs in front of some yeah, what I'm trying to say here?
Slam poetry crowd, yeah, poetry jam,
yeah.
Not Fade Away being the final episode of Angel.
It's a great title. Doug Petrie only had 4 days to deliver the script for this episode, which is just insane.
My God.
Yeah. And Ming Liu, who plays the Chinese Slayer, is also in Chosen as one of the potentials.
Which is the final episode of Buffy.
It is. Oh yeah, we have a very odd, another reference to that phrase, "Here endeth the lesson," often associated with preachers and the Dust Bowl and stuff in the US. But the first person who said that was the Master in Never Kill a Boy on the First Date. So it was just an odd little connection there, given that Spike and the Master don't necessarily get on.
Yeah. Or necessarily
can even
have ever met.
That's true. Sorry, it's Angel who has a conflict with the Master in the Darla episode.
And by the time that they're whirlwinding, they've definitively kind of left the Order of Aurelius. Yeah, so the Master may never have met Spike.
Yeah, true. And Mark Fields notes this episode as being very Rashomon-y, and I would agree. With this versus Darla, you know?
Yeah.
So Rashomon being the Akira Kurosawa movie, the originator of the trope of seeing the same story from different perspectives and having different kind of viewpoints and perspectives, and retelling the same story in different ways. Mm-hmm. The most classic example for me of a parody of that being the Simpsons episode, a very early Simpsons episode where Bart gets hit by Mr. Burns' car, and when Bart's telling the story, Mr. Burns is like this terrifying vampire. When Mr. Burns tells the story, he's like a lovely person who, you know, was assailed by this boy on
maliciously skating in front of his car.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rashomon, the movie itself, is actually about a rape. It's a brilliant movie, but it's the originator of that.
Yeah. Something we didn't even discuss was in the scene on the subway with Mickey Wuggs, that Spike is so clearly Billy Idol.
Yes,
but also that there is a breakdown of the fourth wall there, the interior fourth wall, where he is.
It's a stylistic choice, which is very, very unusual for the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't dislike it.
So basically, the Spike in the flashback is looking up and talking to Buffy in the present and narrating.
Mm-hmm.
And yet unusual, but it works quite well.
It does work. It's a further blurring of the like unreliable narrator kind of issue there, because while he's saying this to Buffy, he's presenting information to her verbally, which is not necessarily trustworthy, but we're being shown as a audience this perspective as if Spike here's the truth that Spike's not telling. So interjecting that with Spike actually interfering with the retelling, it all makes it for very messy goodness.
And also to know that this is where Spike gets his black duster coat from, which he retains until midway through season 5 of Angel.
Yeah, he gets the black duster coat from Nikki and from, what was her name? I can't remember now. Box Rebellion?
Jinrong. Yeah.
Jinrong, he gets his scar over his eyebrow, which is quite distinctive. Yeah. Which James Marsters got in
Mugging in New York. Yeah, and which they worked into his vampire makeup as well. And it's implied that it's because Jinrong used an enchanted sword.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's why it was kind of a permanent scar on the vampire.
Tell me, Joel, some of your Buffy bits.
Brian, I have to say you picked me clean.
I'm so sorry. I could see the pain in your face as I was going through them.
It's okay. It's a team effort, but I won't make up any Buffy trivia. We've covered everything.
You didn't even bother to bring a notebook to this recording.
It's all up in here. So. It's all up here in the brain.
Oh yeah, and another note is that Dawn in this episode is actually quite nice and useful.
Yeah.
She realized that Buffy has been stabbed. She covers for her without any prompting or anything like that. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Very Scooby.
She is good Scooby. And there's also some very nice bokeh behind Spike at one point in the bronze, which is basically just where out of focus balls of light. It just looks nice.
Mm.
Okay.
That could be a title for one of these episodes. Out of focus balls of light.
Yeah. Okay. Fashion.
Fashion.
Okay, so at the beginning of the episode, Buffy's wearing a nice blue top and it has a nice long black scarf, which looks kind of nice, but also made me think of a noose and possibly had the implications of death hanging around her neck. As we noted, the vampire who attacks her and who Riley goes ahead later and kills and then blows up the rest of his
does blow up a mausoleum.
Yeah, is wearing a Clash t-shirt, which I kind of liked. Willow wears when they're going on their
a knitted swimming cap of a hat.
A knitted swimming cap of a hat and a matching baggy pink jumper to go alongside
It's a violence. It really is.
Yeah. I don't have any notes of what Xander was wearing, which is surprising.
In the flashbacks of the Victorian era, the women look great. Angel looks unfortunately
awful.
Terrible.
Yeah. Spike looks okay.
Thirsty Wick. I actually think that era of Spike the Bluggy, where it's like he's taking his Victorian gentleman thing and just got messy with it, is like kind of a compelling aesthetic. Yeah.
You can see how that leads into the punk.
Yeah, I think his actual 1970s version of the Billy Idol thing is fantastic. I really like that look. I think it milks a bit in the modern day eventually. I think when he's walking, I particularly thought in this episode when he's sitting on the stoop, it's like of this Summers household, that there's something about how he dresses that when you're sitting still, it's just like, oh, you just look like you've just come out of ash on the top floor of Stephen's Green / Hot Topic, and there's something not really scary about it.
Yeah, it's true. But yeah, the Billy Idol look I thought was great as well. And on that note, Nikki Woods just looks incredible. Mm-hmm. She's like ultimate straight out of a blaxploitation movie, like absolute badass. She looks just wonderful. She's very cool afro. She has her very cool duster jacket, which she wears far better than Spike does.
I will say that there is I think an effort that when we do see Slayers other than Buffy, by and large they are from a diversity of backgrounds.
Yes, I think that's important too. Because if nothing else, surely the Slayer force doesn't differentiate between races and geolocations.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like obviously Singaya and with Jinrong and Nikki Wuggs, obviously the potentials in season 7 are reasonably diverse, but also I remember watching the end of Chosen recently, and the newly called Slayers are all actually quite diverse as well. And obviously, as we mentioned, the actress who plays Xingrong here, interestingly, I think plays one of them in the final scene as well. So yeah.
Take it. Okay. My last note for the episode is what I've written down here is poor Buffy. Geez, that's about right. Decant. Give me one.
Yeah, actually, quite significant deaths in this episode.
Yeah.
So we have obviously Riley spikes the Clash vampire and then throws a hand grenade into a mausoleum.
3 vampires? Did he kill 3?
At least 3. A vampire nest, a conglomerate. And 2 Slayers die, Nicky Wug and Xingrong, and also William dies, the poet, and it's sired as Spike the vampire.
True that.
So yeah, quite significant character deaths, I think.
No doubt. Okay, are you ready for a rating there?
Yeah,
Joel?
absolutely.
Give it to me, please.
I'm going to give this episode a 9.0 enchanted blades.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, I actually was like, I thought that the part of this episode I would enjoy the most would be the Slayer flashbacks, and what that gives us. I think this episode sold me a bit more on the Spike fandom, where I'm like, look, for our own reasons, it's not necessarily for everyone, but he does give a compelling narrative of one man's evolution from Victorian London to America, and how that might be an interesting thing to watch if you're of the Anne Rice persuasion. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, I just think there's aspects of Spike and James Master's portrayal where he's spinning his wheels literally and figuratively, where I'm like, this is boring because he's not getting to do anything, but when he's in motion and he can do something, he's very compelling to watch.
He's a great actor. Yeah.
And I think that the Sarah Michelle Gellar is great in this as well, just really trying to examine the fact that she has inherited a death date, a very specific one. So yeah, I liked it.
I actually had the same rating, so 9.0 effulgence out of 10. Yeah, really good. The Buffy stuff is specifically good. And I think it's a great companion piece to Darla. I think that would have been a great night of watching TV. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very good. I think the flashback scenes are well handled. I think the Boxer Rebellion is so well portrayed. Okay, that's ridiculous. I'm sure it is historically absolutely horrendous, but I thought visually it was a treat.
To be fair, there's almost nothing in it that would be identifiable, if you know what I mean. So like,
but even that's honestly kind of offensive. But like, do you think Doug Petrie writing this episode read anything about the Boxer Rebellion?
Big Boxer Rebellion stan.
Yeah. Anyway, otherwise the Buffy life stuff is interesting. The conclusion of the episode is a little bit fascinating, a little bit bizarre, and yeah, I think it's just a very good episode, all told. Okay, should we move on to the Cordelia chase?
Yeah, I think it's like a slight lateral segue into the Cordelia chase.
Only very slight.
As we've mentioned, this episode is Darla, and episodes that are named after people are often very significant.
There's only 2 of them, right?
In Buffy and Angel maybe, but even just generally in television.
Oh yeah, we're saying
like Peter and Fringe and stuff like that.
I think those are only 3, but they're all very good.
There are others. There's ones in Star Trek.
Is there a Data episode?
There's one called Day is Day. Yeah.
Oh, I like that episode. I remember
really good. Yeah. But what we have here is very very little happens outside of the core conflict, which is that Darla has now kind of blatantly in the modern day realize that she's not only come back as a human, she's come back as an soul human, and she's now dealing with the trauma of like similar to how Angel did. And she in short, she kind of Wolf and Hart engineered that she comes to Angel with the hope that Angel will sire her, and that will drive him kind of further to the dark side. She wants to be sired to take away the pain of the soul, and Lindsay's following for her, whatever, who cares. None of the other characters do anything, and most of it is framed around various flashbacks to exactly these same scenes, but from Angel's perspective specifically, when he...
Or are they Angel's perspective? Are they not Darla's perspective?
True, that's actually a very good point. Yeah, I don't think we have any scenes that happen purely from Angel's perspective. More Angel focused, and the reason why I say that is because that specifically well shot seeing of the whirlwind walking down the street in the Boxer Rebellion zooms in on Angel rather than Spike, which is odd because the shot is clearly framed for Spike.
Yeah.
But anyway, we see some fascinating stuff. We see Darla being...
Actually, sorry, 1 second. Is the Angel scene where he tries to hide the family? Do we actually see him finding the family and stuff, or do we just find it later?
That's not in this episode.
Oh, is it not?
Yeah, I'm 99% certain we have seen that scene, but I don't think it was in this episode. I think it was a flashback in a couple of episodes ago.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Like it's all the same
Content.
time.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? But we see a flashback to imply that Darla was a reasonably well-to-do woman who may also be a sex worker.
Where do you get the sex worker stuff from?
They say it in the scene.
do they?
Yeah, there's stuff around her being a woman of questionable morals, or
okay.
stuff that's often been taken that, you know, she may have gotten syphilis from this, or this is my recollection of it. I don't think I'm pulling it from the ether.
If she was dying of syphilis, she'll be a lot more insane. But go on.
Yeah, well, they do say that she was crazed and calling out for a priest and all that kind of stuff the previous night.
Go on, yeah, no, lovely.
And in this we have a surprise reappearance of Mark Metcalf as the Master. Again, in great form, immediately slipping back into it. Siren, Darla, and then later on we see her bringing Angel to meet the Master, and them interacting, and kind of how Angel kind of initially is a very exciting differentiation from the Master. And then once he gets his soul, we obviously find out they actually went wild and homeless for a while, and then kind of tried to come back to Darla and tried to kill again. And again, it's really an examination of that, and her still feeling. I think it's an interesting one from a kind of gender point of view. Her feeling that becoming a vampire freed her from a life that she was kind of condemned to die kind of unfulfilled and unhappy in a difficult time in history, and then now she wants to be free and powerful. And Angel's perspective is, you didn't empower me, you damned my soul. And their kind of conflict. But yeah, it pairs obviously very specifically with everything that's happening in Angel, and very much about where the line between the human and the vampire, between life and death, between soul and soul is, and how it's all a fucking mess, basically.
No doubt.
That's the gist of it. Was there anything else really?
I don't think so. It's very good. It's the episode concludes with Angel having escaping. Darla presents a baby to Angel to eat, to prove that he is in the past, to prove that he is still evil, or has aspirations towards evilness. And instead he jumps out the window to escape her, and
with the baby,
never to be seen again. And at the end of the episode, in the present day, Darla runs away from Angel, basically. So the implication there is that at a turning point for both characters, Angel rejects the potential for going towards evil, while ensouled, i.e. morally culpable, and Darla instead opts to pursue evil and awfulness. So it's an interesting one. It's a very interesting shifting point. I think it's a very, very strong episode of Angel. Yeah,
I think Julie Benn is
so
whatever makes season 1 of Buffy, but like, she's done a tremendous role. Like, I remember Darla as this character. Do you know what I mean? She's fleshed it out and given it tremendous like pathos and anger.
Yeah. My only note for this episode in terms of negative is, like, if you look at the two episodes side to side, there's so much focus on Lindsay in this episode, and it goes nowhere. Like, it's for nothing from my perspective. And you get in the Buffy episode, that's equivalent. You get the equivalent focus on Buffy and on, like, a little bit on Riley, I suppose, where he's like going crazy, but then also on, like, you know, Buffy's family stuff. So it's like, well, the Buffy stuff is so much better than the Lindsay stuff.
But overall, I think very enjoyable, very, very Moorish, very nutritious episode of Buffy and Angel. Yeah. That adds a huge amount to both the Slayer and the Vampire canon, so I cannot complain. I love that stuff.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good couple of episodes of watching.
So I would give that probably 8 failed feminist gestures.
Oh, I was going to go 9 failed feminist gestures.
I was like, is 9 ambitiously high? Let's go 9. I'm feeling generous.
No, you can't change.
I absolutely can. No, this is my show. I own 51% of this podcast.
You absolutely do not own. Well, you don't do 51% of the work, Joel. So I doubt you own 51% of the podcast.
9.0 failed feminist gestures for this episode. And yeah, I think that's probably it for this week. It was a lot. A lot happened. A lot happened, and I want to go get a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. So, as always, thank you very much for listening. Hope you're well. Keep safe. Stay sound. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. Tell your friends and tell the effulgent bulges in your life. Did you just come up with that the second? Many people come up with what they say just before they say it, Brian. Yes. Okay, go on. It was the worst thing you've ever done. And we will enjoy you next. That's not what I usually say. No. We will see you next week. Also, hear you.
You will hear us.
You will hear us. We'll be heard next week.
On Buffy Boys.
On Buffy Boys.
See you.
See ya.